Hi! On the Woodpecer today, we bought this tool at a flea market to hold our water bottle. René stripped the paint off, but I will show you why and how I made this insert. At the cottage, we had the habit of putting our water bottle on top of an upside-down bucket. On top of being ugly, it was a pain. Okay, not so much for only a glass of water, but if we needed to fill something bigger, like a water jug, it was not pleasant. But now, with our new stool, it's a breeze. To be honest, I hadn't intended to make a video of René stripping the paint from the stool. But when I started to hide 2 holes with epoxy at the top of the stool, I figured out that it might be of some interest. As you can see, most of it was already done when I decided to make this video. So I'll reenact what I did up to this point. I'm going to use this glue up that I made from already varnished planks of pine. I begin by removing the varnish and making this straighter. When I have enough for my fake stool top, I find the center of the top and trace the shape. To cut this circle, I need to make a jig. This is quite simple. I drill a hole to the size of the collet I'm going to use in a scrap piece of masonite. I also drill another hole on the other side to the radius of the circle. I'm going to use this nail as a pivot. I just need to drive it in the center. With a collet on my palm router and a 1/4 inch router bit, I cut most of the circle, but not all the way because I don't want to damage my workbench. I hold the glue up with clamps, and from the outside, I cut right through. This goes pretty well, until it doesn't. Let's say that I won't be using this jig anymore. To better simulate the original top, I even routed a roundover on the top. To make this as real as possible, I drilled 2 holes just like on the original stool. To hide those ugly holes, I'm going to fill them with lengths of dowels. Okay, the holes are plugged, but let's say this is not really chic. To make them disappear, I find the center of the top. Next, I trace a circle from the center to the outside of the hole farthest away from the center. Then I draw another circle to the inside of the hole closest to the center. With both lines, I can find a router bit to the right size and also a router collet to fit. The only thing missing is a round pattern like this one. This hole can be done exactly like I did for the fake top or by using a wing cutter. It can also be made with a jigsaw and finished with an oscillating sanding spindle. Mine was done with my CNC. But anyway the hole is done, it has to be stuck to the top. For this, I use some small lengths of double stick tape. The hardest thing to do with double stick tape is always removing the protective film. When it's done, I stick the pattern on top of the stool. I eyeball its position with one of the circles I traced. To make sure nothing will move during the cut, I stick another piece of double stick tape under the top. But when I did the real one, I clamped it to my workbench. When I'm sure that nothing will move, I use the collet and the router bit and follow the outside of the pattern. Before removing the pattern, I make sure the circle is perfect. Since it is, and it was also the same for the real one, I have to fill that part so both holes will disappear. To do so, I'm going to use epoxy. After mixing both parts, I add some black dye to the mix. As you will see later, this was not my brightest idea of the day. But nonetheless, I use this dye and mix it well before pouring it inside the groove, which will effectively cover both holes. Now I can continue with the actual stool. When the epoxy is cured, I sand the top and the epoxy so everything is at the same level. Since I want a nice finish on the epoxy, I sand up to 220 grit. The side is sanded by hand. I also take this opportunity to resand everything René had sanded up to 220. After cleaning this, I can spray the first coat of varnish. But it's only when the varnish is dry that I see the disaster. The water-based varnish diluted the dye I put inside the epoxy, and here's the result. I cannot leave this like that. I didn't have any problem when I used the same technique on my recycling bin. But unlike this tool, I varnished it with an oil-based varnish. But anyway, I need to resand the top. This time I'm going to seal this with a coat of shellac. I wipe the shellac, and when it's dry, I lightly sand it smooth. Next, I wipe a coat of varnish on top. When the varnish is dry, I lightly sand it. I take this opportunity to also sand all the rest of the stool. Then I spray 2 more coats of varnish on the stool. Here it is, the stool with 3 coats of varnish everywhere. It's not perfect, because I can still see that the dye spilled a bit. Okay, it's not as disastrous, but one thing I can say is that I'll never mix dye with epoxy again. But my dye problem is not over yet, because when I put a water bottle with a bit of water under it on the stool, the water managed to make the dye reappear again. Lucky for me, I had a bit of varnish at the cottage, so I wiped on 3 more coats. Here is our new stool for the water bottle at the cottage. I'm not totally satisfied, because we can still see some dye stains on top of it. But I have to live with this. This is not as bad as having 2 holes on top of it. This was how I hid 2 holes on top of our water bottle stool at the cottage. I hope that you have learned at least one thing during this video, and also hope that I will see you soon for another episode of The Woodpecker.